The history of humankind is also the history of its servitude to the image it projects before others. From ancient times, when the warrior sought the honor of his peers and the priest sought the approval of the gods, to the present, when millions kneel before a screen in search of virtual likes and applause, there is a continuous thread that binds human beings to the gaze of others. The need for approval is the most sophisticated form of tyranny, because it needs no guards, no walls, no decrees. It is cultivated within the heart, like a seed of submission. It is an invisible executioner, more effective than any whip, because it convinces the slave that he is a voluntary prisoner. Modern man, so proud of his freedom, does not realize that he lives chained to metrics, opinions, and judgments. He dares not breathe outside the consensus, for fear of being excluded from the tribe. But the price of this acceptance is too high. It is the renunciation of one's very essence. And every time someone sells their authenticity to buy approval, the world becomes a shallower, more fragile, more deceitful place. This isn't just an individual issue, but a social mechanism that keeps the system turning. Governments, corporations, and religions have learned to exploit this weakness. Our people dependent on the approval of others are manipulable, because simply offering them praise or criticizing them is enough to shape their choices. Propaganda, advertising, and even politics are based on this logic, promising acceptance in exchange for obedience. And citizens thirsting for belonging give up their freedom like those who hand over coins for crumbs of recognition. There is no whip more effective than the promise of being loved, no prison stronger than the fear of rejection. Thus humanity trades its dignity for cheap applause, believing that applause can fill the existential void that grows ever wider. It's important to note that this obsession with approval not only weakens the individual, but corrupts truth itself. When everyone lives to please, no one dares speak their mind, and authenticity becomes a dying breed. Ideas are filtered, gestures are calculated, words are measured not by their honesty, but by their impact on the audience. This is why we live in a time where superficiality reigns. Better to be nice than truthful, better to be popular than honest, better to be accepted than fair. This silent pact with lies destroys not only individual courage, but the very possibility of human progress, for all transformation begins with the voice of those who dare to displease. There is, therefore, an urgent need to recognize that the need for approval is a chain we must break. It's not about despising others or living in arrogance, but about regaining the courage to be whole, even if it costs rejection. Freedom lies not in being applauded, but in not needing applause. Dignity lies not in pleasing everyone, but in remaining true to who you are. The person who destroys this dependence within themselves is reborn into a more solid existence, because they discover that the value of their life cannot be in the hands of the audience. Only then, when the need for approval is destroyed, does the individual cease to be hostage to the gaze of others and once again become their own master. We live in a universal theater, where everyone plays roles carefully rehearsed so as not to offend the audience. The worker dresses in productivity, the intellectual dresses in erudition, the spiritualist dresses in purity, and the politician dresses in virtue. But behind the costumes lie tired bodies, exhausted souls, and consciences corroded by the fear of not living up to expectations. This constant staging consumes vital energy, creating an environment of collective hypocrisy, where no one dares to speak their true mind, because the truth is always a risk. It may not be accepted, it may not be applauded, it may not be approved. And thus, society transforms into a vast courtroom, where every gesture is judged, every word is weighed, every error is condemned mercilessly. No one lives, everyone defends themselves. No one speaks, everyone calculates. No one is, everyone interprets. The need for approval has created a world where authenticity is a rare currency, and the courage to be different is seen as heresy. In this scenario, mediocrity becomes the rule, because only the mediocre are approved by all. The great tragedy is that this search for acceptance doesn't make us stronger but more fragile. Those who live for approval are never masters of themselves, because any criticism destroys them, any rejection shakes them, any silence consumes them. It's like building a house on quicksand. One breath is enough for everything to crumble. A soul dependent on applause is a slave soul, because their self-esteem is always in the hands of others. And so we see multitudes who, even as adults, live like children, begging for praise from their parents, teachers, and bosses, friends, or followers. The vanity industry capitalizes on this. It sells sculpted bodies, self-help courses, success formulas, all to feed this monster called approval. But the more it feeds, the hungrier it becomes. It's never enough. It's never enough. Those who surrender to this cycle never find peace, because they live in the eternal insecurity that their mask could fall at any moment, revealing a bare face that, perhaps, won't be applauded. It is at this point that Machiavelli, with his brutal coldness, becomes a useful teacher. He never cared about being loved, because he knew that love is fickle, inconstant, unstable. He preferred to be feared because fear, unlike approval, doesn't depend on the goodwill of others, but on one's own strength. The lesson here is not that we should be tyrants, but that we need to destroy this childish desire for acceptance within ourselves. True freedom begins when we stop worrying about what others think. True courage begins when we accept the risk of rejection. True power begins when we become independent of applause. This doesn't mean living at war with everyone, but rather at peace with ourselves. It means walking without the need for an audience, speaking without the need for a chorus, living without the need for witnesses. Only those who quench the need for approval can truly create, dare, and innovate. Because every great work, every great idea, every great revolution was born first as a scandal, as an affront, as a rejection. Today's society, however, thrives on the opposite. There has never been an era so obsessed with the gaze of others. Social media has transformed life into a showcase, and each individual into a salesman of themselves. The logic of the spectacle is total. It's not enough to live, it's necessary to exhibit. It's not enough to feel, it's necessary to share. It's not enough to exist, it's necessary to perform. The value of an experience is no longer in what it means to you, but in how many others applaud it. And so sacred moments become banal commodities, deep emotions become disposable posts, and people become avatars of themselves. Human beings, who could be oceans, are content to be puddles, as long as the puddle reflects a sky pleasing to the eyes of others. It is a silent tragedy. Millions prefer to appear happy rather than to be happy, prefer to appear free rather than to be free, prefer to appear alive rather than to be alive. Approval, this deadly addiction, is eroding human dignity, transforming citizens into puppets, creators into repeaters, thinkers into imitators. But there is a path of resistance, and it is arduous because it demands what most frightens contemporary man: the silence of solitude. To destroy the need for approval is to bear the weight of walking without applause, to accept the pain of not being understood, to face the coldness of being rejected. It is to understand that the majority will always resist what is different, because difference reveals their own cowardice. It is to accept that truth is uncomfortable, that authenticity is dangerous, that freedom is lonely, and yet choosing to live this way. Because in the end, the price of pleasing is the death of the soul, and the price of displeasing is only fleeting discomfort. It is better to be hated for who you are than loved for who you never were. It is better to be rejected in authenticity than accepted in falsehood. It is better to walk alone in freedom than to march accompanied in servitude. This choice is hard, but it is the only one that saves humanity from the slow destruction caused by the addiction to approval. And perhaps this is the great revolution we have left. It is not to overthrow governments, it is not to burn down palaces, it is not to proclaim new ideologies, but rather to regain possession of ourselves. An army of men and women who do not live to please is more dangerous to the established order than any armed demonstration, because they are uncontrollable, indomitable, incorruptible. Those who do not need approval cannot be manipulated by applause or controlled by boos. Those who do not live on praise do not fear criticism. Those who do not depend on external gaze do not bend to the system. This is the freedom that Machiavelli in his harshness reminds us of, the freedom to be masters of our own dignity, It is a freedom not won with slogans, but with inner silence. It is not achieved with crowds, but with courageous solitude. It is not proclaimed on platforms, but in daily choices of authenticity. Therefore, if you want to survive this world, destroy your need for approval before it destroys you. There is no tyranny more cruel than that of the eyes that watch us, expecting us to live up to expectations that were never ours. This invisible prison shapes us from an early age. We learn to smile when we don't want to agree when we disagree, to applaud when we feel like booing. We grow up believing that our dignity depends on the recognition of others, as if our souls were the property of the crowd. But there is no existence is more fragile than the one who lives for applause. Those who depend on the chorus don't walk, they only dance to the tune of others. And when that music stops, when silence falls, only the emptiness of someone who never belonged remains. Break the invisible chains that bind you to other people's expectations. They are light, almost imperceptible, but they suffocate more than any iron shackle. They are made of sweet words, well-intentioned advice, disapproving looks, and conditional praise. Each chain is a concession to your essence, and before you know it, you're entangled in a web that prevents you from moving toward your own truth. Tear off the costumes that force you to play roles unworthy of who you are. Don't accept the guise of exemplary worker, perfect citizen, or impeccable friend if these costumes suffocate you. Life isn't a theater stage, it's a battle arena, and those who enter it masked are already defeated before the first blow. Break the mirrors that distort your image in search of acceptance. The reflection they return is never yours, but what others want to see. They are mirrors constructed by social standards, by the culture of spectacle, by the empire of appearances. They do not reflect your greatness, only your concessions. To free yourself from them is to accept the nakedness of your own soul, to face yourself without makeup, without disguises, without digital retouching. It is to accept that being yourself may mean walking alone, but it is in this solitude that authenticity flourishes. Become a stranger in your own time, if necessary. Perhaps everyone around you bows down, and only you remain standing. Perhaps everyone sells their voice, and only you insist on speaking. Perhaps everyone is content with the chains, and only you decide to break them. So be it. Better to be a stranger in the time you live in than an accomplice to the mediocrity that surrounds you. True greatness is not born of consensus, but of the courage to stand tall even when everyone tries to bend you. True glory lies not in applause, but in the serenity of those who don't need it. True power lies not in winning over crowds, but in conquering oneself. Let this be the pact, dying to the need for approval and being reborn to the dignity of freedom. Because in the end, when the world applauds or boos, when the chorus chants your name or your silence, none of that will matter. What will matter is whether you lived according to your own truth, and whether you were faithful to it until your last breath.